He's our only child, beautiful little boy, and we just want him back more than anything. We have hope, and we'll never give up hope, and we'll never stop searching.
He wasn't lost. He was removed. 6 years old. 3 feet 6 inches tall. Standing under fluorescent lights in a toy department, 3 kids deep in line for a video game. And the adult whose entire job was to protect him walked him out the wrong door, into a parking lot he had never seen in his life, and let him go. Not a stranger in a van. Not a slip past a distracted mother. A decision. Made by someone wearing a badge, inside a building with a police station visible through the front window, 40 feet across the street. And for the next 27 years, the people who knew exactly which door he walked out of said nothing. Not to his mother. Not to the police. Not to a father who would spend the rest of his life wondering if he'd been looking in the wrong direction the entire time.
Who could take a 6-year-old boy and murder him and decapitate him? Who? We needed to know. We needed to know. And today we know. The not knowing has been a torture. But
this is the story of Adam Walsh. And before you get to the man who killed him, you need to understand the 4 people who failed him first, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly who they were, and exactly what each of them cost him. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something, because stories like this only stay buried if we let them. Plenty of channels will give you Adam Walsh's story in 5 minutes and move on like he was a headline. We're not doing that here. We're sitting in this one, all the way through, because somebody owes him that much. If you're willing to sit in it with us, it costs you 3 seconds, hit like, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching this from, and subscribe before we go back to that parking lot. That's genuinely what decides whether cases like this keep getting told, or quietly stop showing up in anyone's feed. Adam John Walsh was born November 14, 1974, in Hollywood, Florida. By the summer of 1981 he was 6 years old, 3 feet 6 inches tall, and absurdly proud of every half-inch of it. Sandy blonde hair. Hazel eyes. A face covered in so many freckles that his father used to joke that if you could special order a son out of a catalog, that would be the one you'd pick. He loved baseball. He loved drawing. Every Saturday morning, without exception, he sat as close to the television as his mother would allow and watched Sesame Street. He called his mother Mommy and his father Daddy, the way most 6-year-olds do, the way that feels too ordinary to even mention, until it's the last thing anyone remembers him saying to either of them. And he was shy. Not the kind of shy a kid performs at a party until he warms up. Genuinely, deeply shy. The kind of shy where a stranger asking him a direct question could make him go quiet, look at the floor, and wait for someone else to answer for him. His parents knew this about him. It was simply who he was. Nobody could have known that the one trait that made him sweet and easy to raise was also the trait that would make it impossible for him to save himself in the only moment of his life that required him to make noise. His father, John Walsh, was a hotel marketing executive riding the high of a $26 million project in Miami. His mother, Reve, was a part-time student and a competitive bodybuilder, building an identity of her own on top of being a wife and a mother. From the outside, the Walsh family looked exactly like the picture on the box: a beautiful home, 2 real careers, a marriage, and one little boy at the center of all of it. Hold on to that picture. In about 4 minutes, it stops existing. Tuesday, July 27, 1981, started the way most Tuesdays start. A family friend, nicknamed Dudley, came by for breakfast and left around 10. At 11, Reve loaded Adam into the car for 2 errands, a $90 deposit at his new school, and a quick stop at Sears for a lamp that had finally gone on sale. They parked on the north side, walked in through the north entrance, and that's when Adam saw it, a brand new Atari 2600, glowing under the fluorescent lights of the toy department, a cluster of boys already lined up taking turns. Reve made the calculation every reasonable parent in the world makes. Security guards on the floor. Staff at every counter. Dozens of shoppers in every direction. A police station visible through the window, 40 feet across the street. It was noon. It was daylight. It was, by any honest measure, one of the safest, most public, most monitored places imaginable to leave a 6-year-old for 10 minutes. She told him she'd be in the lamp aisle, just a few rows over. He said, "Okay, Mommy," and turned back to the screen. She walked away believing, the way every parent believes in that exact moment, that everything was fine. 12 minutes later, a fight broke out in the toy department, for boys arguing over whose turn it was. A 17-year-old part-time security guard named Kathy Schaefer was called over. She wasn't trained for this. She split the boys into 2 groups and sent them out through 2 different exits. Adam was put with the group sent out the east door, a door that opened onto a section of the parking lot he had never seen in his life. When Schaefer asked him if his mother was in the store, Adam said nothing. That deep, genuine shyness, the trait his parents had always considered harmless, did exactly what it always did. It kept him quiet in front of an adult he didn't know. So he followed the older boy out the door without a single word of protest. Not a kidnapper. Not yet. An employee, doing her job badly, who put a 6-year-old alone in a parking lot he'd never seen, because moving him along was easier than walking him to find his mother. 30 minutes after that, Kathy Schaefer heard Adam's name called over the store intercom, and realized exactly what she'd done. "If you're still here, do something for me. Type 'I'm still here' in the comments right now, not because I need the validation, but because I genuinely want to see how many of you make it through what's coming." What happens to Adam in the next few minutes is the part most people scroll away from. Like this video if his name deserves to be remembered correctly. Subscribe if you want to be here when we name, one by one, the people who actually had the power to stop this and didn't use it. Here is what Sears knew, and chose not to say. Employees who handled the disturbance that day knew which exit Adam had been sent through, and roughly when. They didn't tell Reve, who was at that exact moment walking every aisle in the store calling his name. They didn't tell the officers who responded. They didn't tell the Walsh family. Not that day. Not that year. Not for almost 3 decades. Why withhold the single most useful detail in the entire case? Which door, which direction, how much of a head start? Because admitting an employee mishandled a missing child inside their store created legal exposure, and somewhere in a corporate office, that exposure was weighed against a family's need to know what happened to their son, and the company chose itself. Not one bad moment, but a sustained, deliberate choice, repeated every single day for 27 years, to protect a company's liability over a family's right to the truth. 3 PA announcements went out, each one flatter than the last. The Atari sat dark and abandoned, both controllers resting on the carpet like something dropped mid-sentence. By 1:55 p.m., almost 2 hours after Adam was last seen, police were finally called, despite their own station being visible through the store window. It took 45 minutes for an officer to arrive. When John Walsh reached the scene, having raced from his Miami office, the officer already there told him to slow down, that most kids wander off and walk home by themselves. The next morning, a newspaper quoted a police aide saying kidnapping wasn't suspected, that the boy was probably just lost, as if a 6-year-old could navigate 5 miles of South Florida highway alone in July heat. In 1981, there was no national system for missing children. The FBI was legally barred from involvement without proof of a ransom note or a state line crossed. When John demanded to know why Adam wasn't entered into any national database, the county coroner admitted he'd never even heard of it. And underneath all of that institutional failure, 2 parents who refused to stop. John and a business partner moved into the police station and didn't leave for 2 weeks, rigging their own phone line in case of a ransom call. Reve sat through sleepless nights unable to think about anything except Adam's yellow flip-flops. His feet would be tired by now, he'd be cold in just a t-shirt. They printed 500,000 flyers. The reward climbed from $5,000 to $120,000, worth well over $250,000 today. Volunteers walked fields. Truckers passed tips over CB radio. None of it was enough, because by then, the window that matters most in any abduction, the first 48 hours, had already closed. By day 7, national news had mostly moved on. John and Reve had finally secured a slot on Good Morning America for August 11th, one chance to put Adam's face in front of the entire country and beg for his safe return. The night before, August 10th, two men fishing near a drainage canal off the Florida Turnpike, 120 miles north of Hollywood, saw something pale floating in the water. For a few seconds, they told each other it was probably a doll. It was not a doll. The next morning, while John and Reve sat on national television pleading for their son's safe return, 120 miles away, police were making an identification. I'm not going to rush this part, because rushing it would be its own kind of disrespect. What those two men found in that canal was Adam's severed head. Not his body. His head. The autopsy later determined he had been struck across the back of the skull and that the cause of death was a combination of asphyxiation and blunt trauma, with decapitation carried out in 4 or 5 strikes with a blade roughly 5.5 inches long. Based on the state of decomposition, medical examiners believed Adam had died within 1 to 2 days of being taken, which means whatever happened in that car, it happened fast, and then it was over. He never had a chance to be found. He never had a chance to be saved. If there is any mercy at all buried inside this, it's that his suffering was not stretched across the agonizing 2 weeks his parents spent searching for him. Identification was confirmed 4 separate ways: dental records, a visual identification by his father's closest friend, who recognized the gap in Adam's front teeth and the new one growing in behind it, the medical examiner's findings, and years later, mitochondrial DNA from the jawbone matched to Reve. The Walsh family held a funeral with an empty casket, because what remained of their son was being held as evidence. John and Reve stood over a box with nothing inside it, and buried their 6-year-old in name only. I'll be honest, that was the hardest section of this script to write, and if it did to you even half of what it did to me, you cannot just scroll past it in silence. Type one word in the comments, Adam. Let his name be the loudest thing in this comment section, louder than it ever got over that store intercom. Hit like before you go any further, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what comes next is about the people who had the power to get him real justice, and chose not to use it. Statistically, investigators began where they almost always have to, close to home. John and Reve both took polygraphs and passed. Then there was Dudley, the family friend who'd had breakfast with them that very morning, and who detectives discovered had been carrying on a 3-year affair with Reve. Investigators became fixated on him. One officer later admitted they did everything short of beating him. He was eventually cleared. Months of the case file were consumed chasing a theory that led nowhere, while the actual trail went cold. In 1983, with the statute of limitations about to expire, the Walshes sued Sears for negligence. Sears fought back by threatening to argue in open court that Reve herself had been negligent for leaving her son unattended, and by subpoenaing the active police file, a move that risked exposing investigative material and collapsing any future criminal case. The Walshes had no choice but to drop the lawsuit. They had a larger fight ahead of them. A handful of other names moved through the investigation and were eliminated over the years. And then, in 1991, when Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested in Milwaukee with severed heads found inside his apartment, people who had been in Hollywood, Florida that same summer of 1981 started coming forward. Dahmer had been discharged from the Army that March, flown to Florida instead of going home, and was working at a sandwich shop with a delivery van not far from where Adam disappeared. 7 separate witnesses, shown photographs of Dahmer side by side with the man police had long suspected, all pointed at Dahmer. He denied it for the rest of his life, telling investigators that if he'd done it, he would have said so. He'd confessed to every other murder in graphic, documented detail. He was never charged. The question was never definitively answered. It simply ran out of time. The man police had long suspected was Otis Toole, a drifter and convicted arsonist already on death row for an unrelated murder. Over the next 13 years, he confessed to killing Adam more than 24 separate times, recanting almost as often as he confessed. His first confession got basic facts wrong: Adam's clothing, his hair color, and named an accomplice who was sitting in a Maryland jail at the time, provably unable to have been anywhere near Florida. But he also described details that had never been made public: the number of blows, the position of the body, a wooden footbridge near the exact canal where Adam was found. Investigators tracked down the car Toole said he'd used, a 1971 Cadillac he no longer owned by the time anyone could test it. Luminol lit up blood across the front and back floorboards. In one photograph of the carpet behind the driver's seat, something in the blood pattern looked, to the officers who examined it, like the outline of a child's face pressed into the fibers. Those photographs sat undeveloped in an evidence locker for 25 years. The carpet itself was cut out, tagged, and left in storage, waiting for Hollywood police to come collect it. They never did. The car was sold for scrap in 1985. The one piece of physical evidence that could have closed this case with absolute certainty, with DNA, beyond any argument, was gone. Not stolen. Not destroyed in a fire. Simply lost, sitting in a warehouse, while the investigation drifted toward other leads. And the one that costs the most, not a single bad decision, but years of them, compounding, until the one object that could have given this family an actual verdict in an actual courtroom no longer existed. Toole spent the rest of his life in prison on other convictions, dying there of liver failure on September 15, 1996. He was 49 years old. Before he died, his niece visited him twice. The second time, as he was deteriorating, she asked him directly, did he kill Adam Walsh? He told her, in his own words, that yes, he'd always felt kind of bad about it. A deathbed confession, with nothing left to gain by lying, and no one left in the room to perform for. John Walsh later said the Hollywood Police Department didn't even know Toole was dying. Nobody from the department went to see him. 12 years after Toole's death, in 2008, John and Reve hired a retired detective to read every page of the 10,000-page case file from beginning to end. He concluded Toole had killed Adam. Hollywood police reviewed his findings and agreed. On December 16, 2008, with Adam's parents in the room, Police Chief Chadwick Wagner stood at a podium and formally closed the case, apologizing for the mistakes made in the years after Adam's death, the same mistakes that, had they not happened, might have put Toole in front of a jury before he died. John Walsh stood and said simply that the day was proof his son hadn't died for nothing. Here is the part most coverage leaves out, because it doesn't fit neatly on a headline. There was no new evidence in 2008. No DNA. No trial. Toole had been dead for 12 years. What happened that December was a re-examination of an existing file, and a formal declaration that the department was satisfied. The Walsh family received an apology. They never received a verdict from a jury. Some investigators, to this day, still believe the evidence points more convincingly toward Dahmer. The question mark never actually disappeared. It was simply declared finished. For days after burying an empty casket, for days, while the case was still wide open and nobody had been charged with anything, John and Reve founded what would grow into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In 1982, President Reagan signed the Missing Children's Act, finally putting missing children into the FBI's national database, the exact gap John had screamed about to a coroner who had never even heard the term. In 1984, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children formally opened its doors. Reve left school and rebuilt her entire life around it, standing beside her husband. In 1988, after 7 years of fighting through hearing rooms and television studios, John Walsh became the host of America's Most Wanted, a show that ran 23 years and led to the capture of more than 1,100 fugitives, including at least 17 of the FBI's 10 most wanted. In 1994, major retailers across the country adopted Code Adam, the protocol that locks down an entire store the instant a child is reported missing inside it. Named for a 6-year-old who walked out a door he had never used before. In 2006, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act expanded the National Sex Offender Registry and strengthened federal penalties for crimes against children. To date, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has helped recover more than 360,000 children. Every one of those recoveries traces back, in some direct way, to one Tuesday afternoon in a Sears toy department. He was 6 years old. He was shy. He called his mother Mommy. He loved baseball and Saturday morning cartoons, and he had a gap in his front teeth that his father could pick out of a crowd. On a Tuesday in July, he stood 3 kids deep in line for a video game, looked up, and said, "Okay, Mommy," and turned back to the screen, because in that exact second, everything actually was fine. Then 4 adults, in 4 separate ways, failed him, an untrained guard who sent him through the wrong door, a corporation that chose silence over honesty for 27 years, a police force that didn't take a missing 6-year-old seriously for 2 hours, and an investigation that lost the one piece of evidence that could have given his parents an actual verdict. His life was 14 seconds of a store announcement and a boy too shy to speak up. What came after? Every code Adam locked down, every law his parents fought for, every one of those 360,000 children who made it home, that's the only part of this story where anyone got it right. If you have kids, know exactly where they are right now. Teach them it is never wrong to speak up, even to a stranger wearing a badge or a uniform. And if you ever see a child alone in public who looks lost, or an adult whose behavior doesn't sit right with you, say something. Report it. That one phone call might be the only thing that goes right that day. If this case stayed with you the way it stayed with me while writing it, that's the only review I need. Hit like, leave a comment, subscribe for the next one, and remember, no case stays cold forever, but some of them stay open in places no court ever gets to close.